Now that song is the Pearl and Dean theme, of course, from back in the day. This one for the teenagers, also known as Asteroids, which is very appropriate because a meteor of movie knowledge is flashing through our firmament now. It is, of course, the mighty Van Connor there. What a convoluted metaphor that was, Van, to welcome you back to the programme with your Freeview film recommendations. How are you doing, matey?
Can't possibly complain, Mr. Ross. It's always nice to be compared to the Pearl and Dean logo.
Marvellous, yeah, but almost as good as James Dean, is it not? Now, your first film selection, I know you're excited about because you actually WhatsApped me in the week, said, can't wait to talk about this one. It's a cracker. And it is. I'm hungry for it. You're hungry for it. We should be starving for it. Tell us about Ravenous.
Yeah, Ravenous, which is Antonia Bird's 1999, largely British made horror film. This one sort of came out of nowhere, but featured a sort of riding high performance from Robert Carlyle as its villain. At that point, he's mostly known for having done, just broken out like a year earlier with The Full Monty. It puts him opposite a cast that includes Guy Pearce, Neil McDonough, Jeffrey Jones, and it's set in the colonial era of America, in which you've got the Brits still there in their uptight, scratchy-looking military uniforms in their colonies, and Robert Carlyle is the sort of the wanderer who comes into camp one day and says, "You've got to help me. My friends have all been savaged. I need a rescue party," telling them a story of how he was forced to consume human flesh. But what we quickly discover along the way is, within the reality of this movie, consuming human flesh not only gives you superhuman feral powers, it also sends you mad in the process as well. And you can see this, of all places, on Talking Pictures TV tonight at 9:05. I was amazed to find it on there.
I've got a fantastic Talking Pictures TV recommendation coming up as well in a bit. But first of all, it's Ravenous. It's tonight. TPTV. Enjoy.
Mr. Calhoun, you said that when you ate the man. Do you mind if I ask? You said that afterwards your hunger was different, that you felt wanton.
Yes.
Did you feel at all physically changed? Stronger?
I seem to remember something like that. A certain virility. Why do you ask?
I think we know why he's asking. Kids, do not try that at home. It's a cracking film. It's Ravenous on tonight on Talking Pictures TV. Not a spot for choice this week. I nearly went for Gangs of New York, which has been on. I think may even be on again today on Film 4. They're running a bit of a mini Scorsese season. Instead, I've gone for, I think, one of the greatest films, certainly of its era, but maybe one of the greatest films of all time, is the incomparable Raging Bull from 1980, of course, filmed in black and white. And at the Oscars, I think it got 8 nods for the major awards, and it competed on that number with Elephant Man. I think it's the first time since about the 30s that 2 black and white films have gone head-to-head at the Oscars for Best Picture. Now, of course, Raging Bull in the end got 2 Oscars, one for editing, quite rightly, and De Niro got an Oscar, a second Oscar, I think, for acting. It's a story of Jake LaMotta, as we all know, based on an autobiography of the LaMottas, which De Niro found while filming Godfather 2. He had to push and push and push, first the studio, and then Martin Scorsese to make it. He had a hand in writing the screenplay himself. It's an amazing performance, and as I'm sure you know, Van, at one point, I think they shut down production for 3 or 4 months because they filmed some of the boxing, early part of Jake LaMotta's career as a middleweight. He then went around Italy, I think, on an eating tour for 3.5, 4 months and gained something in the region of 60 pounds, which when you think about it, folks, is, in the old money, 4 stone, around 27 kilos. And as we know, it affected his health, his posture and all kinds of stuff. But it makes it wasn't a prosthetic. It wasn't what they go for now, which is, I can understand why, because obviously put a huge strain on his system. It's also a film that's not afraid to be brutally honest about Jake LaMotta's many shortcomings and failings, and it made a star of Joe Pesci, of course. I think it was his first major film role, wasn't it? And he was spotted by De Niro, again, watching afternoon telly, who saw some kind of TV show I've never heard of, I think called something like The Dangerous Hours or something, or The Desperate Hours or something, and phoned up Scott, he said, Marty, there's a bloke on the TV, he didn't use the word bloke, I think, you might want to take a look at, he might be good to play my brother. History was made with that focus. It's a remarkable story to this. It almost deserves a movie about the making of this movie, I think.
I think so. To be honest, we've got The Fabelmans coming out in a couple of weeks, which is the story of how Spielberg grew up and became Spielberg. I kind of think like the Scorsese version would be a more interesting movie, if I'm really honest.
Absolutely, because the Scorsese famously not a sports fan himself. He once said rather famously, anything with a ball no good. He was talking chaps about sports, of course. Still not a boxing fan, apparently, but it's about much more than just the boxing sport is covered brilliantly in it. There's some amazing imagery, but it's about much more than boxing, I think, isn't it? It's a kind of, I don't know what you sort of collapse the American dream, to be pretentious. It's also about male-female relationships, about the Italian heritage of many Americans. So, remarkable film. It's on at 20 minutes past midnight. And I know you always pick on me for this, Van, which means it's technically a Saturday morning selection, but of course we'll still be up at midnight, just after midnight. So if you've never seen it, you're in for a treat. If you have seen it, you're going to want to record it again. Film for tonight, 20 past 12. It's Raging Bull.
The Bronx Bull, the Raging Bull. Let's hear for the great Jake LaMotta, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm the best. I can take him more than anybody.
You're dead. You're married. Leave the young girls for me.
There's no way I'm going down. I don't go down for nobody.
Listen, man, why does he have to make it so hard on himself?
If you beat Trigger Ray, you'll get a shot at the title. You feel that way?
There's no one else around who wants to fight me. They're all afraid. You've done a lot of bad things, Joey. Maybe it's coming back to me.
I've done a lot of bad things, Joey. That's such a great line. Of course, the film is bookended by Jake LaMotta, I think, doing a speech on the waterfront, the speech on the waterfront about boxing, and could have been a contender, before he goes on as a stand-up comedian. I think originally, again, one of the screenplays, and it was adapted, but mainly written by Paul Schrader, who'd already worked with Scorsese on Taxi Driver, made some great films in his own right. It was going to be threaded throughout this nightclub routine. I think they decided that was maybe not going to work. I'm glad. It shows you, though, how films, I mean, I always look at them as stupidly, of being like a finished work of art, like a painting or a vase. They're not that at all. They're so collaborative, so many changes. As with Gangs of New York, I've seen 3 different versions of Gangs of New York, which again is floating around this week. So that's my first recommendation from 1980. I'm babbling because I'm so enthused by this film. And your second one is also a cracker, but a much more this century offering. Very cold, very clinical. Tom Cruise is a bad guy. Tell us about Collateral, please, Van.
One of my very favourite filmmakers, Michael Mann, and this is in his early embrace of the digital filming technique. This stars Tom Cruise in a rare casting as the villain of a thriller starring Jamie Foxx as a taxi driver who is hired to drive a man in a suit with grey hair named Vincent around New York for one night, only to very quickly discover that, is it New York? I think it's LA.
Yeah.
LA or New York. Yeah.
That's great, because the LA locations are ones well off the beaten track, and it's night time, and it's very cold, almost very 80s looking LA, I thought.
Well, that's it, isn't it? So who better than Michael Mann? And as over the course of this night, he finds out that he's been hired by Vincent to basically escort him through his hit list as he picks off witnesses one by one. Yes, it turns out he's no more than a murderer for hire. I've got a clip for you of what happens when the pair meet a jazz legend who's due to be, I think they're all due to be witnesses in a trial. That's who he's bumping off. This one's played by Barry Shabaka Henley. Brilliant actor. You can see this tomorrow night, Saturday night, 11 o'clock on ITV4. It's a proper corker.
Here we go, friends. Collateral. I love this movie.
Where did Miles learn music?
I know everything there is to know about Miles.
Then let's have it.
Music school. You got it at music school, right?
His father was a dentist, East St. Louis. Invested in agriculture, made plenty of money. He sent Miles to Juilliard School of Music, New York, 1945.
Dropped out of Juilliard after less than a year. Tracked down Charlie Parker on 52nd Street and mentored him for the next 3 years.
You just killed him. I didn't kill him. I shot him. The bullet to the fall killed him. It's a great film, this one, folks. It's all Collateral, of course. Now, my recommendation is also a Talking Pictures TV recommendation for tomorrow. It's on at 5 minutes to midnight. I actually am old enough to have seen this film at the cinema, smuggling myself in. I was about 10 or 11 years old when it came out in 1971-72, I think it was, called Vanishing Point, starring Barry Newman, of course. Largely forgotten now, but he was a huge TV star back in the 80s in a series called Petrocelli. He played a lawyer, made a couple of other films. I think he was in an adaptation of a Aston McLean film called Fear is the Key. And he was a bit like, if you couldn't get Dustin Hoffman, you got Barry Newman. And I'm glad they couldn't get Dustin Hoffman with this, because this is a very, very strange but good film indeed. Half of me wishes it had been directed by Sam Peckinpah, but then half of me wishes everything from Grease through to Texas Chainsaw Massacre would be directed by Sam Peckinpah. In a parallel universe, only Sam Peckinpah directed any films, and he's still with us. And basically it's a story of a man who's, the trailer tells the story in that classic 70s way you're going to hear, but a guy who's been tasked with delivering a top-of-the-range sports car across the States, which used to happen quite a lot apparently. And this was the days when they were just introducing kind of real severe speed restrictions because of things like the forthcoming oil crisis. And of course he tangles with law enforcement. Of course law enforcement are largely corrupt. Certainly one officer is. They're chasing him. The car chases and stunts in this are amazing. And there's a real sense of, and again I'm going to be pretentious, kind of existential dread about this. That he's working through a country that's still dealing with its role in Vietnam, which is an ongoing war, not sure where it is. You've got the real kind of them and us attitude between not just, the counterculture of the police, but everybody, it seems, and the police. And it's almost a very dark version of what Peckinpah kind of, just turned up on the set for when he made Convoy, based on, can you imagine Peckinpah making a film based on a novelty hit single, how far he'd fallen. The car chase, if you love car chases, folks, this one's for you anyway. It's a great film. Also, there's a kind of almost in advance version of what they do in The Warriors, when you get this DJ who's almost offering like a Greek chorus of what's going on and communicating. So it's a very, it's almost a 60s film, made at the back end of the 60s, released very early doors in the 1970s. And I mentioned, and I know you know and love your movies, far superior to me, but I was so impressed when you straight away said to me, kudos for choosing Vanishing Point, because I think this is almost a forgotten, almost overlooked classic from the early 70s.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's one of those that very much reflects the sort of mood of its time. You look at a film like Easy Rider, which predates this by a couple of years, and how that came to sort of define its era. I think Vanishing Point sort of slips in through the background there as well.
It's an interesting night as well for Talking Pictures TV. Interesting weekend because they're starting to get hold of. We've spoken to the daughter involved. It's a father-daughter operation, and they tend to get hold of films that are either out of copyright or they could do a very good deal on. And I think then I'm starting to move. I mean, they had Cabaret on last year, and that's not a film you expect to see on Talking Pictures TV. So do look out for TPTV. It's a Freeview channel, and this is Vanishing Point. Just for the car chases and the slow-motion stunt work alone, you've got to love this movie. And it's on at 5 minutes to midnight tomorrow night. So it's a Saturday recommendation, Van. It's Vanishing Point.
Name, Kowalski. Occupation, driver. Transporting a supercharged Challenger from Denver to San Francisco. Background, Medal of Honor winner, Vietnam. Former stock and bike racer. Former cop, dishonorably discharged. Now he uses speed to get himself up. To get himself gone. Everybody's after Kowalski.
There goes the Challenger, being chased by the blue meanies on wheels.
Everybody wants a piece of his hide.
Like anything you want.
The vicious, fast squad cars are after our lone driver.
They want to put him away, but they'll have to catch him first. It's the maximum trip at maximum speed. Vanishing Point, rated GP.
The maximum trip at maximum speed. How did that bloke get his voice out? Also, I must correct myself. I made a mistake. It's 9:30 tomorrow night, Vanishing Point on Talking Pictures TV. 9:30, folks, for 1971. The reason I had 5 to midnight on mine was I was so tempted to go for This Is Spinal Tap, which is on BBC One tomorrow at 5 minutes to midnight. So I've snuck in another recommendation there. So This Is Spinal Tap, classic comedy, tomorrow at 5 minutes to midnight. And my final selection is a great comedy. Didn't make a huge amount of money when it came out. Has made a fortune since. It inspired, John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd to keep performing as the Blues Brothers. It is, of course, the Blues Brothers. Not a lot to say about it. A pair of orphans, savagely raised by nuns, beaten every single day, it seems, learn that the old orphanage where they were treated, where they were, raised up, dragged up, basically, is under threat of closure, and they want to get involved. They've recently been discharged from prison, so they decide they're going to get involved with the concert, putting together some of the blues R&B greats of all time. I mean, they pop up in this film at a rate of knots. If you blink and you'll miss them, like Steve Cropper, Aretha Franklin does a couple of numbers, I think. Ray Charles, which is amazing. Ray Charles, James Brown, and of course, stealing the whole film for me from the early days of, I think from the 1930s in Harlem, Mr. Cotton Club himself, Cab Calloway, who turns up. Yes. It's an amazing, it deals brilliantly in a very light way, but that's the best way to treat those idiots, with things like, extreme right-wing politics. I mean, the scenes involving the Nazis and the final line spoken as he's about to, spoiler alert, plummet to his doom of one of the Nazis is one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen. I saw this film virtually on my own at the Herne Bay Odeon when it came out in the year of its release. I must have seen this 2-3 dozen times since, and every time it's on, I can't resist watching it. It's a cracker, this film, is it not, Van?
Oh, it's an all-time. I remember watching this on VHS for the first time in the Middle East as a kid. God, I love this movie. Also, you left Aretha out of your
Aretha, of course.
reading.
That's right.
There as well.
Who does Think in it, and I mean, just an amazing, and the James Brown scene, where they're doing the kind of the evangelical meeting, where you suddenly see John Belushi, obviously not John Belushi, doing backflips down the aisle. Again, that's every scene laden with gold dust. Great film. Shame about the Blues Brothers 2000 sequel, but moving away from that disaster, it was released in 1980, 9 o'clock, Sunday night, ITV4. I'm going to save my clip, though, to play us into the break, because I've gone for the music clip from it, I think. Also,
naturally enough. Quick
mention, of course, you've got, I think at 10:15 Sunday night on ITV, there's John Wick, the first John Wick film, and also 6:25 coming up, we've got The Searchers is also appearing on ITV4 just before the Blues Brothers. If you want a bit of John Full Western action, who doesn't? Go for that. But it's the Blues Brothers for me, 1980, my Sunday recommendation. You've gone for something rather different, have you not? You've gone for Congo.
Well, I'm a big fan of Congo. It's one of those movies that's sort of beloved in my childhood. I think I was 12 when it came out. It's one of the first movies I remember going with my friends to the multiplex and seeing, like, Son's parents. And it's from 1995. It's on Sunday afternoon, 3:05. And this was an attempt to cash in on Jurassic Park. This was an attempt to sort of replicate the success of Jurassic Park. Although they got it horrifically wrong, because it turns out killer monkeys are no substitute for dinosaurs. And what you have here is a telecommunications company that go into the Congo to recover a fabled diamond to power their new satellite network, without realizing, of course, that the team that went in before them, whose trail they're following, which was led by none other than Bruce Campbell, by the way, great appearance here, have in fact met their demise because they have wandered into the ancient sort of grounds of a race of forgotten killer monkeys. It also features a sign language translating monkey of its own named Amy, who wears like a big harness that literally Siri-style speaks out the sign language she's making, and her handler, played by a pre-Nip Tuck. What's his name, actually? Is it Michael Hall? Dylan Neal. Sorry, it's Dylan Neal.
Well remembered. I would never have got that one.
Oh God, I was a big Nip Tuck fan. Played by Dylan Neal as her handler, and but the thing is, it's all about the scene stealers. It's all about Tim Curry and Ernie Hudson, who turn up about a third of the way through this and just decide to lay waste to everything else that's not a scene they want to own. And to prove this to you, I've got a clip for you of Delroy Lindo meeting Tim Curry and Tim Curry's interaction with his beloved sesame cake, which is worth the movie on its own. Delroy Lindo as well. Add him to the list of MVPs. This is such a great movie. Watch this one. If you've got kids who like Jurassic Park and you want something that's kind of like that, this may have slipped under your radar, and it's well worth a good old-fashioned Sunday afternoon kind of family-friendly scare.
I've not seen this since it came out. You've convinced me to catch it again. It is, of course, the mighty Congo for Sunday afternoon. Here we go.
Mr. Homolka? Well, stop eating my sesame cake. Stop eating my sesame cake!
See, that line on a bit of paper, as they used to send scripts in those days, or on your smartphone these days, would die would just flop there, would it, like Haddock beached at Brixham Harbour. He makes it live, doesn't he? He urges his call, does he not, Mr. Curry? Every film he's in back in the day there. And I've forgotten to listen to it again recently. He's so good in Hunt for Red October, isn't he? As the kind of KGB. He's a great actor. So, remind us though, Van, is Off Screen your podcast back today, later on today, for the first time this year?
It is, in fact, back. You can get the very first episode of 2023 on podcast platforms from 8 a.m. And it's a good time. We're talking about Megan. We're talking about A Man Called Otto. We're talking about Tar, which I think is titled that because that's how difficult it is to get through. But yeah, everything that's out in cinemas this week.
Marvellous stuff. Now, you're going to know where this comes from, folks. I know Van will. It's 106 miles to Chicago. We've got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark. And we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it. Van's back next week.